Going live, going live. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're live. Hello and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. Tonight we got a great show. We're going to be talking about nothing but Thanksgiving. And we've talked about this stuff before, but I got great new information for you with my great co-host, Hawkeye Two Feathers, David Null.
Hi, everybody. Greetings to you and happy Thanksgiving a couple of days early.
That's right. Thanksgiving comes at any time of the year that you can be thankful for.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be on a certain day. That is what I'm finding out. The tradition of Thanksgiving has been somehow misled, misdirected, and shammed in front of our eyes. That's what I want to say.
And commercialized.
And commercialized is right. So, yes, commercialized Thanksgiving. So, on your commercialized Thanksgiving, what are you doing?
Me? I'm going to stay home with the dog.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to stay home with my dogs. I don't know, maybe make some food around here, just rest the day away. And, you know, really can't do much. There ain't much going on for stores around here. Maybe I don't know. It depends on the weather, but I really don't have a whole lot planned. I think that's about it. Maybe call some friends or something like that. I'll give you a call because you're my friend.
Yeah, there you go. Happy Thanksgiving.
That's right. Call some friends, make their day, even if it's a short phone call. Be thankful for your friends in your life. That's important.
Reverse the charges, make them feel good.
That's right. It's not about the food. It is about the food, the friendship, and the families, but it's the getting together. And I'm realizing that it's been really commercialized. And I dug through all of my oldest history books, right? Of course, I got good old history books. And I'm sad to report, with all the old history books, nobody talks about Thanksgiving.
Really?
No, they don't. No matter how far I go back or what I do, nobody's talking about Thanksgiving. And it's pretty sad. I thought I was going to find something interesting in there saying, and the pilgrims sat down with the Indians and they all rejoiced and had a great meal and thanked God and all these other good things. Nope. Lady Spellbreaker, Heather's in the house. Hey, thank you for coming. And Pearl Jones, Michelle Can-Am Free, thank you. She is the first. Yes. But stay tuned, people. For me and Lady Spellbreaker to be coming out. We got a show taped and ready to go for you later this week, probably, or soon anyway. So maybe you can listen to that over Thanksgiving. While everybody's got all these other things going on and you got nothing to do, you can hear a great show by us. And that's how it works. Oh, Hawkeye knows me as Free Flow. I don't know, but that's...
And who's that?
The Lady Spellbreaker.
Oh.
Yeah, go check her channel out, everybody. Subscribe to her. I can put a link in the description if you want. Or, let's see here. I can do this. Maybe I can. I'm pretty handy at this kind of stuff, you know. DG.
Yeah, and I was searching for stories, and I just came upon something that's ironical.
Did you find something good?
Well, it depends on how you want to define good.
Yeah, well, you know, there's all kinds of good. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. There we go. Look at that. You want to subscribe, people? go over to Lady Spellbreaker and sub to her. She's got a good show. She does a lot of card reading. We did a show on astrology today, and you'll get to see that in the future. Hopefully before Mars and Venus retrograde, and something with Jupiter. But you'll have to check that out. And since I ain't gonna give away the whole show because we're not talking about that tonight. Tonight we're talking about the Pilgrims, and we're talking about stuff that happened a long time ago and how it all got commercialized. And why are we celebrating Thanksgiving today? Were the Indians really there? Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, wasn't all as great as it's cracked up to be. And I am going to go through this book a little bit. But, when do you think the first Thanksgiving was?
I would say the Indians are yet to have one because the white man's still on the continent.
That's right. That is right.
There's several stories I ran across in these in one of the books that's on digital.
Yeah.
And wait, let me pull it back up here. The first bargain made with the white man, and it talks about how the white man come and the hospitality was invited by the Indians and everything. And, then the white man cheated the Indian, and the Indian said, that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty much
it.
it.
There's not going to be a Thanksgiving dinner with us,
and that's exactly it. So there wasn't much Thanksgiving back in the day. There was more pillaging. There was more heartbreak. It wasn't so much about the Thanksgiving of the Pilgrims. It was the pillaging of the Indians, taking their stuff. I'm sad to report that the first Thanksgiving was the grain that the Pilgrims took from the Indians as their first act upon the land. And that is saddening. And if I can find that here, I will. And I got it marked out. And it is sad because I don't even know what to think about that. Oh, I should have went through that book too.
This story is only about 2 pages long. Can I read it real quick?
You bet.
I got it queued up. It's going to go right along with what you're talking about.
Okay, where do I find this?
The name of the book is called Before the White Man Came.
Okay.
And it's on the first book. It's in Indian books.
Okay.
But I just thought I'd read it while you were looking for that other stuff because it's only a couple pages long.
Okay. Before the White Man Came, right?
Yep.
It only takes me a second. Before the White Man Came. All right. See, I got it already.
This kind of sets everything up.
Well, I'm glad you found this because I went through all these old books I got. And I like paper. I tried to go through some of these, but I just couldn't. What page?
Oh, page 20. Before the White Man Came.
Oh, there we go. And look at that.
The first bargain made with white man.
I am a good bus driver. Because you know why? Because I really can go fast. Okay, we are set, man. I love it. I'm glad you're on top of things today. Makes me happy. Okay, there you go.
All right, here we go. It's a short story, but it sets up, it's amazing, Robert, every week something happens where we gel.
Yes.
Having not discussed anything or, we find stuff that's relative or related or whatever. Anyway, So the fact that I wasn't thinking so much about Thanksgiving, but just reading through stories, and I thought, gee whiz, this is interesting. The first bargain, which from the Indian standpoint, and then what about the white man? Oh yeah, our first, we had a Thanksgiving and we did this and that. Yeah, well, then you listen to the Indian side of the story. So
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
so this is much more typical of what the Indian rather than turkey and dressing. Okay, I'm ready. The first bargain made with the white men. The people who lived along the shore of the big water, the Atlantic Ocean, had instructions from other tribes to keep a sharp lookout and not let any strange beings land. One day, as some Micmacs were fishing along the coast, they saw a cloud-like thing skimming over the water. A winged boat was drawing near, loaded with pale people. The Indians were so taken by surprise that they offered no resistance to their landing. In fact, they thought in their best policy to be friendly with the newcomers. The white man hospitably invited the Indians on board the wonderful ship, treated them to a feast, and allowed them to examine the queer things they had brought with them. The white men made them a present of some hoes, spades, axes, and tinware. Not knowing the use of these things, the Indians hung them about their necks. After that, the white men taught them how to cut down trees with axes and make gardens with hoes and spades. It seemed that the two races were going to live in peace and concord. The land was big enough to hold them all without crowding. Of course, the Indians considered it as their own, but were willing to let the strangers have a corner to live in. One day, a white man came forward saying he wished to buy a piece of land. The Indians considered a very small piece, the size of a cow's hide. The Indians considered the matter and agreed to sell such a small portion. They thought the white men could live in a very small space because they had seen them crowded on their ship. As soon as the Indians had agreed to the bargain, the white men selected his largest bull and killed it. Instead of stretching the skin on the ground to mark off the land, he proceeded to cut it into tiny strings. With this string, he measured a large piece of land. The Indians were angry and tried to defend their rights. A war followed in which the white men were successful, and after which they became the enemies of the red men. An old chief spoke sadly about this unfair bargain in this way. So it was, and so it shall always be. The white man will cheat the Indian until he has everything. The old time saying has been handed down among the tribes that they must adopt the white man's ways because they will always be in his clutches. And that kind of sets up what you were talking about. The first they brought them on board and fed them, some venison or whatever. They say it's a feast, but
Yeah.
And the white men's been after it ever since and still are,
That's right. But there was these
So the
books.
first Thanksgiving was a battle.
Yeah, it was even more than that. Okay, I gotta go to the real old books. It's really hard to find stuff in these books. Okay. It's kind of sad. Okay, this is how. Oh, okay, I gotta get rid of this. Shrink that and go to things.
And to those folks who might be listening to us and think, after week after week after week, we're beating up the white man. I'm sorry, but the truth hurts. It is what it is. All these stories about how the white man came and, and they discovered America, blah, blah, blah. It's one of the worst acts of genocide the world has ever seen. The white men, against the Native Americans. They talk about Hitler and the Jews and anybody else that they could throw in them concentration camps. What the white people did when they came to this continent is literally genocide. So, they folks can go, well, it really wasn't like that. And oh, yes, it was. I got to let the dog out. He's being bothersome.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
You can't find your story?
No, I think I got it. It's right here. Okay. Let's see. We're talking about, I should get my notes. My notes were better than this. And I put them down somewhere here. People, notes. Notes. That's the wrong notes. Oh, there's the right note. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story from back in the day. It has to do with the Wampanoags. We've talked about these guys.
Right.
Back in 1620, the Saskatchewan chief Osawamegan and the Nargassets. Those were the people of Massachusetts. As you notice, the Nargassets, they took the Massachusetts is named after them. And these guys developed, we just talked about the King Philip's War. These were the ancestors of King Philip before everybody came. Well, in order for the first people we know that came here was not the Pilgrims. It was the English that came down. They were conquering lands just as the Spanish were. Sir Walter Raleigh was one of the first early in 1500s, like 1508 or 1520 or something like that came here and set up some small colonies along and discovered, the Indians and, set out in some adventures and said, hey, there's good land over there. Well, along came these companies. Of course, everybody has to capitalize. There was the London Company and the Plymouth Company. And they set out charter ships to go to America. These ships, one of these ships, the Plymouth Company, set out with the Pilgrims. Now, who were the Pilgrims? The Pilgrims were people of English descent who believed their religious stuff was all wacko from what the England had set, and they were very persecuted. So they went to Holland. They were English people living in Holland, and they decided to, pack up their stuff, get on a ship hired by the Plymouth Company, not just one ship, but two ships they hired. Private company, private ships to haul them to America to start a new life. Unfortunately, the two ships were the Mayflower and the Speedwell. Well, the Speedwell wasn't seaworthy and turned back and went, turned back to shore. Didn't make it. It was a 63-day voyage. they were headed for the Hudson River, but they didn't quite make it. They ran into some bad weather. After 63 days of sailing, they just couldn't find the Hudson River. They didn't really know where it was. Remember, they didn't have good maps and stuff at that point. Where everything was, there was no GPS, like turn left here, go there. There was no Surrey, where am I at? you know what I'm talking about. Anyway,
they barely had a compass.
Yes, they barely had a compass. The magic needle, they called it. So these pilgrims were coming from Holland and not coming from England, as I believe they set out from. They got misdirected. They didn't go up the Hudson River. They ended up near, Plymouth Rock, if you've all heard about that. They searched along the coast to find some good shore to park on, and they just couldn't find anything. And they're literally starving on the boat. John Smith was their leader. All of a sudden, they came across a small bay, had good place to park the ship. And they set out, decided that, they're hungry. This is in 1620. This is the fall of 1620. They get out of the ship. One of the first ones to touch Plymouth Rock is Mary Chilton, if you want to know that. They get off the ship. They take their guns, readily armed. Because as they were going along, they see beautiful trees. They see more fowl, birds, everywhere they went. And they're like, we're going to get out here and shoot us some food. So they get out. They go into the woods. First thing they found was a grave. How appealing is that? Along with the grave, they found a bushel of corn buried next to it, as the custom of the Indians. And they figured that the savages might not be as savage as they thought, because the two people buried there were, lined up next to each other. They just weren't thrown on a hole and, covered up kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So they realized that these people must have some sort of intelligence and compassion for burying their dead anyway. They seen the bushel of corn and they took it. So their first plot about this, getting on this land, is they took corn from the Indians.
And they defiled
a grave,
two sacred graves. And
yes.
Oh, so much for the white man, eh? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It's worse.
Yes. So they took the grain. It says in there in the fine print that they did later pay for the grain. But I'm thinking, you were that desperate that you had to dig up the bushel of corn, and you took the bushel of corn with you? You see what I'm saying? It's like, really? Wow, you guys were starving.
If it was buried, how'd they know it was a bushel of corn? But anyway, know.
Anyhow, they got the corn. They shot, I forget how many birds, how many fowl, like 6 geese. And they came back to the ship and everybody feasted. I take that as I take that as the Thanksgiving, because it's in the fall. They celebrated because of their good fortune of finding food after a long time. They took food from the Indians. That's what the Indians gave them. Corn for bread. Anyway, as it goes on, they said, well, we're just going to settle here. This sounds like a good spot. And they all got off the ship, all their belongings, everything unloaded. And they started on building a cabin for everybody to stay in. So they built one cabin after another. They built the whole little town, a hospital, a place for, everybody to stay, a council house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They did a little trading with the Indians. They were the people were not as well off as they thought, and as the story goes, if I could find, I'll find it in here in a little bit. But I'm just telling you from what I read is they didn't have a lot of supplies with them at this point. Remember, they just got there. They didn't have much to trade with the Indians. The Indians didn't have much. And there they sat with their house just in the fall, and snow's coming and it's getting cold. What do? Well, by spring, half of the people had died. Most of them died from sickness, dysentery, I think it was more starvation, because when you are hungry and malnutrition, you get weak, and then you get sick, and then you die of the littlest things. You could catch the flu. That's why during the winter, people get sick because they don't go outside and don't get enough vitamin D. They get malnutrition, and then they get a little cold, they get pneumonia, and they die because they're lacking vitamins and minerals. Very important. Isn't that smart about taking that vitamin D, isn't it?
And since you mentioned it, most folks know I've been going to the doctor for heart attacks and things. And I went to the kidney doctor last week, and they gave me some heavy duty vitamin D tablets. And I mean, they're 50,000 units. And I'm supposed to, tomorrow I take my third one. But they only prescribe 8 of them. So for 8 weeks, you take this super duper vitamin D. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to put it across to you and remind you all, please take your vitamin D. It is very important for the body and for the kidneys and other functions. Please take your vitamin D. Very important.
Yeah, that is true.
And the other thing which surprises me, I mean, they were on the Atlantic Ocean. They came into the bays. Now, I've lived around water and grew up in Tampa. And when I was hungry, we netted mullet and baked it on a fire. We sat and came up with stuff. We shucked oysters. I mean, I can't imagine. And I mean, I was homeless in Tampa many years ago, but we never went hungry. And I can't imagine that if they lived on the ocean, that they were starving.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. You know what I mean? I mean,
Well, they
stuff,
said,
I mean, they lived on the ocean.
They said that they caught crabs and lobsters. The women went down there and picked clams or whatever out of the seashore and stuff like that. Stuff like that. I'm thinking here. Here's a good one. Here, I think this is where I wanted to start. Here, though, no right of individual property in lands was established. A small quantity, they're talking about the Pilgrims, quantity of land had been cleared, was cultivated by the joint labor of the whole. The produce was logged in common storehouses and distributed weekly to every family according to its numbers and its wants. A society so constituted might indeed, under a rigid discipline and terrors of actual famine, produce the mere request of existence, but is not formed to advance beyond the lowest approximation to the state of infancy. The idle must still be a way of the industrious. To remedy this evil, the governor divided a considerable extent of land in small lots and granted one of these to each and every individual, for which period the colony rapidly extended and improved. This began the culture of tobacco and a native of that soil, since becoming the great staple of Virginia. And that was I think that was before the Pilgrims here. I'm looking at the dates here. Sorry. I'm looking for a 1620. Maybe this is it. 16 jumps right to 1651. 1619. This is the spirit of Governor Legend, Governor Council. This is a hard read. Natural effect, the happy change the existence of the agriculture. Now it's back. Well, anyway, I don't remember where I read it. But anyway, what happens is, I think it was the following year. And again, the following year, the Pilgrims had set up their colony, and they were doing their thing. They had gotten their food. Hang on a section. I know what's in here. Maybe I got the wrong freaking book. That would be just my luck. But anyway, what happened is, I think it was the following year. What happened is the colonists had grown food finally. There was about half of them. And they waited, and a ship finally came with supplies from England to trade with them. And that's what saved their asses, because they were, really, really hurting. And see.
And let me add this too. The Pilgrims and them folks that got on those company ships, they were indentured servants. Okay. Yes. When they knew that when they got to the promised land, and by the way, it was billed as the land of milk and honey. So, folks are like, oh my God, the promised land, there's nobody there. There's all these resources and good land and good dirt. And yeah, well, you got to work for that stuff, and you can go hungry in the meantime.
I think I found it. This has got to be it. Yeah, I think it is.
So when they got to the new land, when they got to the promised land, they had specific duties that they were supposed to do for the company, because they had to turn a profit, because exactly. They may have paid their way over, and the supplies were coming, they had to make a profit. So, as it's always been about companies, by the way. Just want to kind of add that.
Yeah, here it is. Colonization of the country originated either in religious persecution carried on by England against the Puritans and the demonstrations of the Christians, in a visionary schemes of adventure, who set out for the New World in the quest of settlements and pursuit of gain. It was the former cause which peopled the colonies of New England, and it was the later that the colonies of Virginia and New York owed their origin. These many be considered as the original or parent colonies. They struggled long with hardships and difficulties, incident to all new establishments on barbarous shores, remote from civilized society and from the means of procuring aid and supply their wants, and in protecting themselves against the hostilities to which they were exposed. They were at times reduced to great extremities by sickness, disease, and want, and by the attacks of desperations of the Indians, insomuch that in some instances it was resolved to abandon the settlement of the country as impractical. All these impediments, however, being gradually overcome by the perseverance, industry, enterprise, and the colonies, at last began to flourish and to increase both in wealth and population. Okay, and then it goes on. Yeah. It talks about the two companies, the London and the Plymouth. This is where I got this from. Yeah. And it was assigned, they each was assigned a territory. It gives the longitude and the latitudes. Settlements. Okay. King James called Jamestown. The governor of the colony was the first administrative colony persons. Okay, the name of the first president was Wingfield, but the most distinguished member of the council was Captain John Smith, who was the second year chosen president and who had been styled the father of the colony. He was commanded as a company of cavalry of the Austrian army in a war with the Turks. He had been taken prisoner and sent to Constantinople as a slave, from which condition he had excruciated himself or extinguished himself. He was a man of undaunted courage, romantic disposition, and undaunted spirit of enterprise. And to his superior talents, the company were greatly indebted for his success. The colonists were soon involved in contests with the Indians, whose hostilities against the English were not unprovoked, as they had been previously treated by them with cruelty in 1585 by Sir Richard Grenville, who burnt the whole Indian town and destroyed their corn in revenge for their stealing a silver cup. See what the Indians got? You stole one of my cups, I burn your whole village and all your crops. Yeah.
Yeah, we love the white man, don't we?
Yeah, I'll share with you. That's right. Mr. Lane, the leader of the adventure left by Sir Richard, slew at Sketchum and killed and took captive several Indians. The year in which the settlement was commenced, an incident happened to Captain Smith, which led to this history and attraction of romance. While engaged in hunting, he was taken prisoner by a body of 200 Indians and so charmed. Oh, this was the one about Powhatan. Okay, we've read this before. Pocahontas thing. Yeah, 1622. But yeah, these people. Okay, during the first years of the colonists suffered severely by scarcity and badness. Provisions, disease were consequences introduced, which in a few months swept away one half of their number, but others were added by new arrivals and so on, that the end of the year that they amounted to 200. In the later part of the year 1609, Smith at once shielded the sword of the colonies and returned to England. That was Captain John Smith. 12 years. Okay, and expiration of 12 years from the settlement, remaining only about 600 persons during that year 1619. The number was increased by the arrival of 11 ships bringing 1,200 new settlements. This was down in Massachusetts. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, this is what the colonists were facing. You know, they went there. Now, believe it or not, the Pilgrims and Salem, Massachusetts, were one of the first colony settlements. Believe it or not, when those and they were far set out. I don't know why. I thought it would have been Boston or something like that. I'm going to trade books here because I think I don't have any more in this book. Yeah, because it's really hard to find stuff in these old books, but it's really interesting too, all at the same time. But the bad part is, oh, this is the one that I got that out of. Now this talks about, okay, this is the Pilgrims. Now this is a history book. Those were history books from 1830. Now this is a history book from, I think, and they don't say anything about, this one's from 1885. And nowhere in this one does it talk about Thanksgiving either. Now that book was from 1830, and it doesn't really talk about Thanksgiving at all, does it? It just literally skips over it. It talks about the Plymouth Company, the Pilgrims coming, etc., etc. And that's about it. Okay. Unexplored continent of America, where there was yet, this is 1885 book, and yet no English settlement but in Virginia. Even before they had resolved on this, they had been called familiar by name Pilgrims, because they were wandering. Pilgrims word was because they were wandering from place to place on their way to heaven, their dearest country, as they said. That's what pilgrim is. Wandering from place to place. So out of several hundred English pilgrims in Holland, about 100 were selected to go to America. Such of the youngest and strongest as freely offered themselves. They procured 2 small vessels, the Speedwell of 60 tons and the Mayflower of 180 tons. The last being intended to sail from Southampton, England in July 1620, the Speedwell sailing from Death Haven. The pilgrims had religious services before sailing, and their old minister, John Robinson, said in his address to them, I charge you before God and his blessed angels that you follow me no further than you have seen me follow the Lord Jesus Christ. So they did have to go back to England, Southampton, but they were in Holland. So they must have had to, jump ship. I charge you before God, his angels, follow me no further than you have seen me follow the Lord Jesus Christ. The Lord has more truth yet to break out of his holy word. They were feasted at the pastor's house, and one of them wrote, we refresh ourselves after tears with singing and psalms, making joyful melody in our hearts as well as with the voice. There being many of the congregation very expert in music, and indeed it was the sweetest melody that mine ears ever heard. After this, he adds, they accomplished us to Dale Haven to the ship, but were not able to speak one to another for the abundance of sorrow to part. But we only going aboard, giving them a volley of a small shot and 3 pieces of ordnance, and so lifting up our hands to each other and our hearts for one another, the Lord our God, we departed. Thus the pilgrims set sail without aid from government and without any royal charter for the New World. After touching at 3 English ports, they still had a long passage of 63 days. The Speedwell proved unseaworthy and put back, while the Mayflower went alone. Instead of reaching the Hudson River, where they had meant to go, they were driven by storms to Massachusetts shore. For a month, they sailed up and down, looking for a favorable harbor along the coast. It was a barren region, but it seemed pleasant to them after the sea. They saw pines, juniper, and sassafras, and other sweet woods growing on the shore. They found their narrative says the greatest store of fowl that they had ever saw. They saw whales, and they had even fired at one. The gun exploded when the whale gave a snuff and away. When they first went ashore, 16 men landed, with every man his musket, sword, and corselet, headed by Captain Miles Standish. They saw 5 or 6 people with a doggie who were savages. These all ran away and whistled the doggie after them. At last, in the valley, the pilgrims saw a deer and found springs of fresh water, of which were heartily glad. And the narrative says, and set us down and drunk our first New England water with such much delight as ever we drink in all our lives. Then they found a grave with mats and bowls and a skeleton of a man and that of a little child buried together. Perhaps it was pleasant to them to see the parents and the children loved each other, even among the wild Indians. Then they found a great basket of Indian corn buried in the ground. This they took, and afterwards, finding the owners, paid for it. They killed 3 fat geese and 6 ducks, which they ate with soldier stomachs, their story says. See, that's where I think the first Thanksgiving would be, because you found corn buried in a grave, and then you shot some ducks and geese. At last, they came to the harbor to which an earlier explorer, Captain James Smith, had given the name of Plymouth. They fixed on this as a good place for their settlement, and on the 21st of December, 1620, they landed. A young girl named Mary Chilton is said to have been the first to step on Plymouth Rock, but before landing, they had held a meeting in the cabin of the Mayflower and agreed that every man in the colony should have an equal share in the government. They chose John Carver for this first governor, and they also formed a military company with Captain Miles Standish to command it. The soldiers had each a coat of mail and a sword and a matchlock musket, and we shall see hereafter how well they defended the colony. They brought on shore their possessions, such as we may see this day, preserved as relics as Pilgrim Hall at Plymouth, armchairs, spinning wheels, and Miles Standish's great iron dinner kettle, and little Loretta Standish's sampler, and the cradle of Peregrine White, the baby who was born on board the Mayflower, and who was named Peregrine, with the peregrinations of the Pilgrims. Landing in early winter on the cold, bleak shore, they began at once to build houses. There were 102 persons to be provided with shelter. First, they built the common house as a temporary abode for all, and they divided themselves into 19 families, and by degree a house was built for each. These houses were of logs and mortar, with thatched roofs and with windows of oiled paper. The rooms were so crowded that they were as full of beds as they could lie, one by another. Then they built turn the page. These pages are real fragile, so I gotta be careful. This book's, 100 years old or better. Great shed for the public goods, and a small hospital for the sick, and a church, which had 4 cannons planted on the top for defense. Here they could have their religious services in safety, with good Elder Brewster for their minister. As for food, they lived by hunting and fishing till they could raise corn. Sometimes they killed deer and wild turkeys. They caught shad and cod, took lobsters and shellfish. The Indians taught them to shoot fish with arrows, and to tread eels out of the mud with their feet. Once they tried to eat an eagle and thought it tasted very much like a sheep. For several years, they had no cattle and could scarcely have kept any because of the lions, as they called the wolves, which came close to the town. Often they suffered for want of food. Often they knew not at night where to have a bit in the morning. I've seen men, says one of their number, staggering by the reason of faintness for want of food. What with hardship and exposure, just 1/2 of their number died during the first winter, including their first governor, and they planted cornfields to conceal the graves so that the Indians might not know how weak they really were growing. Yet in the spring, when the Mayflower returned to England, not one of those brave colonists went back. Women with sick children preferred to stay in the comfortless country rather than to live in the comfort at home. While the Pilgrims were establishing themselves at Plymouth, there were some temporary English settlements made at other places along the coast, but the principal colony was yet to be founded on the 29th of June, 1629. There came sailing into what is now Salem Harbor 5 vessels, one of these being the self-same Mayflower, and that brought the first Pilgrims. They had been 6 weeks and 3 days at sea, and the passengers called the voyage short and speedy. It had been the prosperous voyage, and only one person who described it says, "Our passage was both pleasurable and profitable, for we received instruction and delight in beholding the wonders of the Lord in the deep waters, and sometimes seeing the sea round us appearing with a terrible constance, as it were full of high hills and deep valleys, and sometimes it appeared as most plain and even meadow. Then, when they came along the coast, the same writer says, by noon we were within 3 leagues of the Cape Ann, and we sailed along the coast. We saw every hill and dale and every island full of gay wood and high trees. The nearest we came to the shore the nearer we came to the shore, more flowers in abundance, sometimes scattered abroad, sometimes joined in sheets 9 or 10 yards long, which we supposed to be brought from the low meadows by the tide. Now with the pine woods and the green trees and these yellow flowers painting in the sea, made all the desirous to see our new paradise of New England, whence we saw forerunning signals of the fertility afar off. How much unlike the first approach of the pilgrims to Cape Cod in the frosty autumn weather. The new colony was called the Massachusetts Bay Colony. John Edcott had preceded it with a few men the year before and had been appointed governor. So the second try was probably the better try. He left no account of his voyage. Those who came in 5 ships, whose arrival I have just described, were Francis Higgins, Reverend Francis Higgins, 200 more. They came in 1629. Then the next year, Governor Winthrop came with 800. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was large, strong, and rich compared with that of Plymouth. It included many highly educated men and some rich men. They had powerful friends in England, and they had charter from the king, securing to them the right to govern themselves so long as they did nothing contrary to the laws of England. They founded the town of Salem, which they called by that name because of its Hebrew significance, peace. Afterwards, they settled Boston. At first called Tri-Mountain, or Tri-Mountain from its 3 hills, and also Roxbury, Dorchester, Charleston, Watertown, and other places. The colonists were not pilgrims from Holland or separatists, as the Plymouth colonists were sometimes called, but they were Puritans or religious reformers who came from England hoping to find more freedom from themselves in America. They had been persecuted for their opinions at home, though not so severely as the Pilgrims, and the Puritans at first thought that the Pilgrims did not feel kindly enough towards their mother country. Okay, let's see, I got something here underlined. But for all their large numbers, the greater wealth of Massachusetts colonists suffered almost as much hardship as Plymouth settlers had undergone. They had to be sure from the beginning, horses and cattle and tools. But one of the early colonists wrote, bread was so scarce that sometimes I thought the very crumbs of my father's table would be sweet unto me. And then when I could have meal and water and salt boiled together, it would be so good. Who could wish better? The Indians did sometimes bring corn and truck with us for clothing and knives. And once I had a peck of corn or thereabouts for a little puppy dog. Frostfish, mussels, and clams were a relief unto many. Another writer describes how the women in the seaside settlements used to go down to the beach every day at low tide and dig for shellfish. It would have been a strange thing, says another, to see a piece of roast beef or mutton or veal. One day, just as Governor Winthrop was giving away the last handful of meal, possession to a poor man, they saw a ship from England with provisions just entering the harbor. A good many died of hardship and fatigue during the first year or 2, but after that they grew quite healthy. They found the climate bracing, and one said that a sup of New England air was better than a whole daunt of old English ale. Even in their worst times, very few went back to England, and notwithstanding their poverty, there was not an instance of theft among them for 4 years. Governor Winthrop wrote to his wife, we here enjoy God and Jesus Christ, and is not that enough? I thank God I like so well to be here, as I do not repent my coming. I would not have altered my course, though I have foreseen all these afflictions. I have never more content of mind. These two colonies, Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay, were for many years independent of one another, but the Plymouth colony, though the older of the two, grew far more slowly than the other, and was at last united with it in 1692 under the name of Massachusetts, the name being taken from one of the tribes of Indians inhabiting the soil. Meaning of the word is said to be Blue Hills. And there you go.
So
That's
they
what
even stole
that-
the name from the Indians.
They even stole their name. So the Plymouth settlement, as I read, was dwindling, and the other settlements. This was in a different book, and I won't go get into it, but too much. But they were running out of men, or they had men, but they were running out of women. And one of the ships came in and literally contracted to bring just women. So they brought like a whole boatload of women for the men because they were going to give up. The men were like, we're out here. All our women are dead. We don't have any women. We're going to go back. We're done. And so they brought a boatload of women. And then the next boat, they started bringing slaves along. And that helped them with the work because they're working too hard. So they brought a bunch of slaves, women and slaves. Gotta love it. I forget how many pounds it cost per woman, but they couldn't pay because they didn't have any money. So they traded tobacco because they were growing tobacco. And this was another downfall of the colonists. So a lot of the colonists were out there looking for gold. And apparently there's gold there somewhere. So they're out mining for gold instead of growing crops and getting food, hoping that somebody's, the Indians didn't care about gold. You could have got all the gold you wanted, and the Indians ain't going to give you corn for it. And that was a kind of something I thought was kind of weird. So you're a miner, and there's nobody to trade your gold for the food because there is no food to trade for. You know what I mean?
And along the East Coast, Georgia has gold in them there hills.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's much gold up around Massachusetts in there. I mean,
Yeah.
I just have not heard of gold being up there. So they'd been wasting their time more than finding. If they found anything, they wasted more time.
Well, that seems to be the thing. They didn't find any gold, and they're coming to this new land where they heard there might be gold, et cetera, and they're not finding it, and they're not growing crops neither. And like I said, the Plymouth settlement wasn't growing as fast. They only brought 100 people, and half of them died the first year. Well, yeah, you notice when they landed there, and they started setting up shop around the end of December. Come on. It's not even the end of December now. It's getting cold. Can you imagine? Yep. It's the end of December. Snow is flying, and you're thinking, I got to cut down these trees, and we got to skid them over to the thing and build a house, and I got no firewood. And well, if you're building, see, this is the other problem. If you got 100 people and you're building houses, who's doing the hunting and the fishing and the cutting the firewood? You know what I mean? And then, like it says, then the next downfall I see was the fact that you're what was I going to say? So you got all your resources building these cabins, and you got everybody stacked together, bunks and bunks and bunks, it said, right? Well, if one guy gets sick, he's going to infect everybody else. You know what I mean? When you put people in those quarters like that, and then you also got to remember, they didn't have running water. It ain't like, wash your hands, do this, do that. Those guys live pretty primitively, compared to what we live. They didn't know hygiene like we do either. You're living in coarse quarters and squalor like that. if one guy gets sick, he spreads it to everybody, and next thing you know, you hope to God you don't catch it and die.
And one of the things that they didn't have was vitamin C.
Yes.
And so you got scurvy, but not only that, but without vitamin C, they couldn't fight off any infections.
Yeah.
So, their immune systems dropped. They might have had the right foods, but if you didn't have the right vegetables or if you didn't have vitamin C, like oranges and fruits and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. And where are you getting this vitamin C from? I mean, you're sure not picking an orange off a tree in December. You're out there boiling pine needles. And did they even know to boil pine needles for vitamin C?
Well, there are documents, where they were so hungry they were eating tree bark.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's just like this guy was saying, he says they were getting faint in the fields because there was nothing to eat. The Indians were trying to teach them how to use a bow to shoot a fish or what have you, and I'm thinking, and can you imagine? We dumped all your stuff off and we're in the Mayflower and we're heading back. Hope you guys survive.
Can you imagine to have all your stuff just dumped off on the beach?
Yeah.
And just say, okay, see you later,
Well, yeah, and
good luck.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, that's one of those things that you just shake your head, you think, oh my gosh, what have I done? What's the hell's going on here?
I don't watch the shows much, the Survivor series kind of thing, but it shows them that they dump, these contestants get dumped on an island and blah blah blah. Well, that's basically what happened with the Pilgrims. Of course, they brought a lot of stuff with them, hose and flintlocks. I mean, it's not like they.
Oh yeah.
They came what they thought they were prepared.
Well, think about it.
At the time, they thought that they were prepared. Okay.
Yeah.
But they found out later on it took more than what they had.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and the other thing is that when the other settlement that came in, they brought 5 ships. There were 800 people.
Yeah.
That helped.
Yes, more people.
The more people that were there, they could divvy up the hunting and the fishing and the building and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So
those, that just goes.
I think they failed mainly because they didn't have enough folk.
Well, that is true.
If the other ship had made it, things might have been different for them.
A better fighting chance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark Spark is in the house. He says hygiene. What's that? That's something that we take for granted.
I mean, they left England where people were literally they were dumping their honey pots just out the window, 2nd story window. They were slinging their slop out into the middle of the street,
Yeah.
And so that's why they didn't want to go back. They were like, oh hell no.
Well, yeah, England had been turned into a shithole. Lucky Stone says vitamin C is in birch bark, pine needles. Yes, we talked about that. Natives told them to eat bark and they thought they were being insulted. Yeah, I guess if you said, hey, eat the bark, I'd be like, what? It's just like right now, aren't they telling everybody, eat the bugs? We're gonna make bugs. You're gonna eat bugs and like it. Well, everybody's like cringing, going, why am I gonna eat bugs? I'm not eating bugs.
But in Thailand and over in that area over there, and Vietnam and things, bugs is a regular part of the regular diet.
Yeah.
But to that point though, it's wintertime here, and unless it's hard to even find a palmetto bug this time of year. So wintertime, well, then what are you going to eat? The bugs have all gone into hiding. It's you know, the butterflies have flown to Mexico. What are you going to eat?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. Well, no, I totally agree with that. Like I said, it's one of those things where we take stuff for granted. This was like the biggest, if you had a video camera there at the time, this was just like one of those shows, only there's no button to push for somebody to come and rescue you.
Yeah, there's no helicopter that can bring in a fresh supplies or drinking water or, and back in those days, I can't remember the virus, LaGuardia or something anyway, to drink out of the streams. Yes. And so native folk were drinking out of streams because they had built up an immunity to it. And so, but the white man came over here and was drinking out of streams. And what it is, it's a parasite that comes from the feces of all kinds of animals, and it comes downstream and it'll be in the water. So, to this day, don't dip that canteen in that quote fresh water. You don't know what's upstream of you. You don't know what has pooed or died in the water.
Yeah, a lot of people died from dysentery.
Right. So you get this thing and it gives you the stomach cramps and, and a lot of people died from it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Lucky Stone says Giardia is in the water. Yeah. And Giardia, I guess that's.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. And people get dysentery a lot because they didn't boil the water before they drank it. They just drank it, Hey, looks fresh, drink it. I remember my buddy and me, we went hiking up to Lava Lake up in Montana. And we brought a bunch of water with us. We got up to the top of the lake and coming back down, we had no water left. We got 3 miles to hike, or maybe we had 1 bottle of water coming down. And we drank that up and we're walking right along a creek, the stream coming down the mountain. And he's like, oh, I'm so thirsty. And so, he's going to bend down and drink some water. And I looked at him and I said, what are you thinking? I said, you drink that water. That's great today. What if you get sick by tonight? Well, you want to end up in the hospital? What if there's one little germ in there? What if a thing shit in the water upstream, or something peed in there? Or, well, you going to take that chance? I know I'm thirsty, but I'm not drinking out of that water. You know what I'm saying? I mean, all water everywhere, but I don't have if I had a water filter, one of those life straws, I'd drink out of the water. I'd feel pretty confident, but to just drink the water.
Now I've been in the swamps and I've been in the mountains and I've taken a little bit of water and cupped it in my hand and like taken a sip, like, just to wet my lips. And knock on wood, I've not had any kind of dysentery.
Yeah.
But as far as putting my canteen in and filling it up and drinking a bunch, no.
Yeah. That's the thing too, is you might be able to ward off a little bit and you probably didn't even notice it, but to guzzle a bunch because you're thirsty, you're taking a lot of chances there. I don't think I would feel so safe.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Lady Spitfire. She says, Robert, check out James's Ader's book, History of American Indians. It's an old book about his life of 40 years with the natives. I will have to do that. Anyway. Let's see. Come on, Christmas spring. Yeah, but anyway, the worst part is they got there in December, I think. Like you said, the colony got bigger and bigger. And once they had a big colony, in one of these other books I was reading, they talk about how they were having problems. And I think we already read that about how the natives got bad, and then they sent a troop out right in the fall, about Thanksgiving time, and they burnt the Indian villages down, burnt their stores of food, burnt their houses and huts, and pretty much wiped the Indians out for the winter because they didn't have a place to live and they had no food. And do you think we helped them out? No, we just left them die. So what does that tell you? It tells me that during Thanksgiving, we went out there, we burnt their houses down, destroyed their crops, took their corn, and said, see ya. Wow. We're good. We're good souls, aren't we?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would consider that first part with the pilgrims where they shot the birds, found the corn, and rejoiced would be the first Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, pretty sad that you had to take it off a dead person.
Yeah.
Grave.
I mean, hi, we're Christians and we're gonna defile your savages, grave sites. Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh boy is right. I mean, just take the birds. If you seen the corn, you should have just said, well, let's go trade with the Indians. It looks like they got corn. Let's not defile the grave. It's something. But then again, you're coming by these Indians, not knowing if they're hostile or not, because your predecessor, who came in 1585, probably gave them a bunch of diseases and killed most of them off, came there and literally, wiped them out, burned down their houses and crops because they stole the silver cup. They probably didn't even realize they stole it.
Well, from the time of Columbus and whoever truly came into the Americas, the natives already knew that them folks that come in them ships, we got to be careful.
Yeah,
we got to be careful. We can't. I mean, as far as the story I read, the first bargain,
Yep. Yeah.
they got cheated right off the bat, and they were like, no. So I think word went up and down the coast that, hey.
Well, remember, we've been reading about those, how Cortez and them came in, and each tribe heard of him, and each tribe said, we'll outsmart him. We'll be better prepared. I'm going to have troops in wait for him. We'll destroy him. And then he came in like, how you doing? I want to trade. I'm just passing through. I'm looking for this and that. Let's celebrate that I'm here. Yada, yada, yada. And then after he got cozied up with him for a little while and had a nice big meal, tells all his troops, okay, guys, they don't know what we're talking about. Get your guns. Okay, there's the leader. Take the leader prisoner, grab their stuff, burn their houses, take their things, and we're moving on. And he literally, what are the Indians going to do? They don't want to attack because you got their leader.
Right.
They don't know how to fight you because you haven't really shot off any of your guns. And then all of a sudden it's boom, 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 smoke filled the air, a cannon roared, leveled a house. They started everything on fire. Like, holy cow, these people were really nice last night and they went crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's your Thanksgiving right there. What do you think of that?
I think it's time for a story.
I think so too. I definitely do, because the more I read into the history of this, it's kind of depressing. We need something to cheer us up. What do you got tonight? Cheer us up. Just point me in the right direction and I'll get there right away.
We're in the same book.
Okay. Same book. What page?
There's several stories, and let's go to page 24, because this kind of sort of goes with what we've been talking about.
Well, the white man came.
How the white man came to be the red man's master.
All right. Got it. I am on it. that ain't it. Huh. Trying to make this page readable. There's gotta be a thing. Okay. View. Oh,
I've got it queued up also.
yeah, I just want to see it. Oh, full screen mode. Let's go. Oh, look at that. I figured it out.
You can have everybody read along with me.
Yeah, okay, hang on. There we go. I was just trying to figure out how to make it bigger now. Huh. I can go full screen mode, but there we go. There, that's the best I can do.
Whoops.
And then it'll go that. Figured out how to turn the pages now. There's all kinds of features on here.
Okay. All right. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right. How the white man came to be the red man's master. The Atlantic coast Indians say that when the Great Spirit made the earth, he created 3 men of equally fair complexion. Then he took out in a canoe on a lonely lake and bade them jump in. One obeyed without hesitation. He found that the water did him no hurt. Instead, he came forth fairer than before. The second dallied and hung back. He did not jump in until the water had become muddled from the motion made by the first. So his complexion became copper colored. The third was even more disobedient. He hung trembling on the edge of the boat until Manitou, in anger, threw him in. The water was now so muddled that it was black. So his complexion became black as he passed through it. For a second test, Manitou placed before the men 3 sealed packages, telling them they might each have one to keep. He gave the black man first choice. The black man examined each with care. His whole thought was to get the best package, caring little what the others drew. One package was larger and heavier than the others. Likely it would be the most valuable, he argued. He chose it, opened it, and found to his bitter disappointment that it contained spades and hoes and other tools of hard labor. The copper-colored man had second choice, and he too looked long and examined carefully. He coveted the larger parcel, caring little what was left for his companion. On opening it, he found fishing tackle and weapons of war. The little parcel left for the white man was then opened and found to contain pens, ink, and paper. So the white man was the only one who had the means to improve his mind. Gradually, he learned so many wonderful things which the others did not know, that he easily became their master and made them serve him. Now you think to yourself, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you know that's a very simple. There's another story I got queued up. Go on down to page. Oh crap! Oops. No, it's not page. Oh crap! It's page 28.
All right. Lamp of the Ghost Woman.
Yeah.
All right.
But when you know, there are many stories about the different colors of people. Now, understand that this book here that we're reading from is from 1923 or 1823. It's old, the copyright on it.
Yeah.
So the stories that were told, you know, about, you know, black man, the copper colored man, you know, it's like, wait a minute, what? So, but anyway, long before there was any I would say black man on the in North America, except those that had been brought for slave trade. But anyway, this next story, The Lamp of the Ghost Woman.
All right, here, I pull it up. Okay, there we go. You're all set. The
Lamp of the Ghost Woman. Over a small and stagnant lake in the heart of New Brunswick is seen sometimes on murky, moonless nights a ghostly light. The white people call it will-o'-the-wisp, but the Indians call it the lamp of the ghost woman. When they see it, they bring the children inside and shut the doors, for they know the ghost woman is searching, ever searching for someone she cannot find, and she might carry them off in mistake. The story goes that long years ago, one of the Abenaki maidens was wooed by a white man who would come among them to trade in furs. And just a few days before the marriage was to take place, the lover was called away on important business among his own people. Down to the big bustling town he went, leaving his sweetheart sad, but confident of his speedy return. I will surely return and claim you in a few days. These were his words. Lonely but hopeful, the maiden waited till the day set for his return was come and gone. Then other days followed, gliding into weeks and months, until spring grew into summer, and summer at last died in the arms of winter. The drooping maiden became the laughing stock of her people. See what comes of loving a pale face, they mocked. Take one of your own people. When he returns, if he ever does, laugh him to scorn. Show him your pride and spirit. Still the maiden waited, for she loved the white man better than any of her dusky relatives. She was very thin and almost as white as the woman of her lover's race. One night in winter, while a great storm was raging, the maiden was startled from sleep by the sound of her lover's voice. She heard her name called distinctly, but in a faint, unearthly voice that might have belonged to a spirit. Convinced that her lover was wandering about outside, lost in the snow in the depths of the forest, the girl put on a mantle, took up her light, and started forth to find him. All night long, the people in the lodges saw the light swing back and forth around the shores of the swamp. In the morning, no trace was found of the maiden, nor has she been found to this day. But on damp, murky nights, the glow of an unearthly lamp gleams and disappears again on the shore of the swamp where last she was seen to stand. It was learned afterward that on the very night of the great storm, on which the maiden thought she heard the voice of her lover calling her name, He said goodbye to the people of his town and started on snowshoes for the Indian village, intending to claim his waiting bride. He never returned to his own people, and it was thought he perished in the storm. The Indians hoped that sometime the woman with the lamp will find him, and their reunited souls will go together up the rainbow trail to enjoy the rest and peace of the spirit world.
Very cool.
Not a bad story, is it?
No.
I mean, it's sad, you know.
Yes.
But a coinky dink.
Yep. There we go. I got it back.
All right, so I pulled a card from earlier.
Okay.
Since it's 11:30.
Oh, yeah. 10:30 my time. Hey, we're doing pretty good tonight.
Yeah, but still, but it's an hour and a half already.
I know. It gets a little long. Sometimes my history. Well, you did read a story in the beginning too. So
yeah. We were just getting warmed up, but it's all it all has been relative or related or something.
I mean, I thought it was just fascinating how I worked so hard. I thought I'd find the story about Thanksgiving and how the natives were, rejoiced together and shared food and broke bread and
all you could find was war and mayhem.
Yeah, all I found was death and destruction. The worst part was when I found and the pilgrims found the bushel of corn buried with the two dead people and took it. And I thought, even though they said they found the owners and paid for it, it's just still the point. You're taking corn from dead people. What? Okay. What card you got tonight?
Interesting. And I I tried to get out of it and they said no. Is owl.
Oh, owl. We haven't had owl in a while.
An owl is deception. Owl, magic omens, time and space. Does the truth emerge? Casting out deception, silent flight, sacred medicine bird. Owl medicine is symbolically associated with clairvoyance, astral projection, and magic, both black and white. Owl is called the night eagle on several medicine wheels used by Amerindian teachers. Traditionally, owl sits in the east, the place of illumination. Since time immemorial, humanity has been afraid of the night, the dark, and the unseen, waiting fearfully for the first crack of morning light. Conversely, night is the owl's friend. Owl hunts its prey at night. Not only can owl see in the dark, it can also accurately pinpoint and identify any sound. This gives it a great advantage when seeking food. Owls are the night hunters. Some native people are fearful of owl and call its feathers deceiver feathers. An owl feather is silent. You cannot hear owl when it flies. Owl is oftentimes the medicine of sorcerers and witches. If owl is your medicine, you will be drawn to magical practices and perhaps explore the dark arts. You should resist any temptation to practice black magic or any art that takes energy away from another person or being. And they want me to repeat this. You should resist any temptation to practice any magic or any art that takes energy away from another person or being. That means anything. If you have owl medicine, these night birds will have a tendency to collect around you, even in the daytime. because they recognize a kingship with you. Is it any wonder that in many cultures, owl is a symbol of wisdom? This is because owl can see that which others cannot, which is the essence of true wisdom. Owl can see that which others cannot, which is the essence of true wisdom. Now just think on that sentence for a minute. When you can see something that, or understand something that somebody else, somebody might not understand, that's wisdom.
Yep.
Where others are deceived, owl sees and knows what is there to not be deceived. Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, had a companion owl on her shoulder, which revealed unseen truths to her. Owl had the ability to light up Athena's blind side, enabling her to speak the whole truth, as opposed to only a half-truth. If owl is in your personal medicine, no one can deceive you about what you're doing, no matter how hard they try to disguise or hide it from you. You may be a little frightened to be around since so many people have ulterior motives, which you can see right through. If you are unaware of your medicine power, you may take your keen insights and abilities for granted. Others never do. You may frighten them and reflect their blindness, for you cannot be fooled. Excuse me. If you have pulled the owl card, you are being asked to use your powers of keen, silent observation to intuit some life situation. Owl is befriending you and aiding you in seeing the whole and total truth. Owl can bring you messages in the night through dreams or meditation. Pay attention to the signals and omens. The truth always brings further enlightenment. Now, I find this interesting deception because, you know, some of the new news that's out there is about, you know, it was on CBS today and all over the news that somehow, you know, Hunter Biden's laptop is now like valid.
Yeah.
And how many of us have been watching the story over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years about his laptop and the FBI, and all the major news stories have all said it's Russian propaganda. And now, today, all of a sudden, it's become valid. Wait a minute, CBS reports that this is true. Wait a minute, what? So, but to pull the owl card, deception, to deceive, the truth. So, you know, we're the observers, but many of us have seen the truth for a while. We weren't really deceived by the whole thing. But the interesting part in pulling that card is like, you know, the truth has come. Oh my God, all of a sudden today's different. Why? Because CBS said it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know, now ain't that something?
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, it's kind of, it is, you know, we've been, you know, somebody right off the bat can say, listen, you know, and you go, wow, it's just common sense. You found a laptop, the guy was on the news, he said, found this laptop, Hunter Biden turned it in. You know, it says Hunter Biden on it. His pictures are on it. His name is on it. Oh, that's Russian deception. Well, maybe we should investigate it. But then again, you know, the guy gave it to the FBI and they did nothing with it for a long, long time. Why? You start asking questions like, well, were they just trying to cover it up or research it or something? Or, you know, at some point, get on that. You know, what do we pay you for?
Because it was the vice president at the time, It was the
Yeah.
vice president's son,
Yeah.
and etc. It is all about politics. But the interesting thing is that from last week to now, it wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's true.
Yeah. And then the thing is
So the
will it go?
owl is showing us the deception. They're showing us the truth. So that's interesting.
Well, the question is will it go anywhere, or is this just going to be the next big, deception for us? And you know what? Do you really think that they're going to go to Hunter Biden's house, arrest him, and walk him out in handcuffs?
I don't know, but they should do that to the vice president. I mean,
Well, yeah, and you think they're going to do that to him too? No.
We'll see, but the interesting thing is that it's taken a new twist. It's taken another turn.
Yeah. So, and it's only because, and the only reason it has is because the Republicans are apparently getting into office, and now they get their hand at trying something, versus where the Democrats said, we're not going to do anything.
But here's an interesting thing, though. CBS is a liberal station. If it'd come out on Fox and they said it was true, everybody would have said, yeah. But so here's a quote, liberal spewing, follow President Biden around and he's the greatest since, sliced bread. That all of a sudden they changed their tune.
Well, they kind of have.
I'm just saying something else is in the works because they're not Republicans at CBS.
Well, but that's the thing. They know that this is the next big news story to follow. Maybe. Because what are you going to do? Not report on the fact that I'm not going to report on it, that Congress is going to be investigating this laptop here in the future.
Right.
And they're going to hold all it. Well, what's Congress doing? Well, they're holding meetings investigating the laptop, but we're not going to report on it because it's fake Russian. This has been going on for a year. How come you're not reporting on it? Because we're not going to report on the fake Russian laptop. Congress has been investigating it for over a year. It's like, what?
Actually, they've been, it started before the election.
Well, yeah, and I know that.
So, I mean, but to the point, we'll see how this turns out. Thank you for the owl card tonight, and that deception and truth is coming out. It's going to be interesting.
So, but here's the thing: it's getting out of hand. This is the way I kind of look at it. If you can't, if the deception is coming out, the only way to get a hand on it is to manage the deception.
Right.
So that's what they're doing. I think they're getting on top of it, reporting it. And then once you start reporting it, you can direct that news any which way you want it.
Yeah.
So even, that way it's out there now. You can't hold it back. I mean, there's a point in time where you can't hold back the news, but you can sway the news and report it any which way you want to report it now.
Yeah.
See?
Put that twist on it.
Yeah. And so instead of coming out and saying, well, Hunter Biden is being found guilty, they can come out and say, well, all this stuff about Hunter Biden is a bunch of lies. It's made up. And then they'll just go and listen to all the Democrat stuff about this, that, and the other. And then everybody will be like, oh, yeah, I don't agree with it. I think it's all made up. Yeah, I listen to CBS News and it's a bunch of malarkey. I don't want to hear no more about it. Yeah, and that's how it'll be, because they've reported so badly on it that you'll turn it off. Anyway.
All right. Well, listen, I got to go chase a dog down.
Yeah. Okay. That's all right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, David, for being my co-host. And I hope you go off and have a great Thanksgiving. It was a great card.
You all. Be safe and have a great Thanksgiving, y'all.
Yes.
No matter what you're eating or doing. I might be getting in touch with Robert and we'll do Thanksgiving, over the phone.
Absolutely. You gonna have a show tonight?
Maybe a short one. I got x-rays and stuff at the hospital tomorrow early. So
Okay. Well, with that, remember everybody, go out, be the frequency you want to receive. I love you all. Peace, everybody.
cheers.